The porch swing creaked with a rhythm older than memory itself. A slow, steady creak pause, creak that had marked the passing of 40 southern summers. Loretta Mae Washington sat in her throne of worn wood and rusted chains, her hands moving with the practiced grace of a woman who'd spent 65 years making something out of nothing. The knitting needles clicked together like tiny bones. Purple yarn, Isaiah's favorite color, slowly transformed into a scarf that would keep her grandson warm come winter. Not that Charleston got particularly cold, but the boy was headed to Massachusetts for some fancy debate tournament, and Lord knows those Yankees didn't know the first thing about heating a building properly. Click, click, click. The rhythm was meditative, peaceful even. A lie, of course, but a comfortable one. Loretta took a slow sip of her sweet tea, the real kind, brewed in the sun with enough sugar to make a dentist weep, and surveyed her kingdom. The paint on her house was peeling something awful, revealing layers of history beneath. The pale yellow from '92, the mint green from '78, the original white from when her daddy first built this place in 1955. The front steps sagged in the middle where generations of feet had worn the wood smooth. The screen door didn't quite close right, hadn't since Hurricane Hugo back in '89. To anyone passing by, this was the home of a poor old black woman barely scraping by on Social Security and the charity of her family. Bless their hearts, Loretta thought with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, if they only knew. The ancient radio on the side table crackled with Sister Rosetta Tharpe's voice, singing about strange things happening every day. Appropriate, considering what was about to unfold. Loretta's cell phone, a flip phone because smartphones were too complicated for an old woman like her, buzzed against the glass of sweet tea. The caller ID read, Reed and Associates. She didn't answer. Not yet. Let them wait. Instead, she closed her eyes and let herself drift back, way back, to when she was young and foolish enough to believe that hard work and a good heart were all you needed to get by in this world. June 12th, 1985. The night was hotter than Lucifer's kitchen, and the AC in the ER had given up the ghost around 9 p.m. Loretta Washington, 25 years old, 5 years into her nursing career, and already tired enough to sleep standing up, was on her second double shift that week. She'd just finished cleaning up a drunk who'd decided to fight a stop sign, the stop sign won, when the ambulance screamed in with lights blazing like the second coming. GSW, heart attack? What we got? Loretta called out, already moving toward the bay doors. M.I., male, 62, pale as a ghost and sweating bullets, the paramedic shouted back. Says his chest feels like an elephant sitting on it. The gurney burst through the doors and Loretta's trained eyes took in the patient. White male, expensive suit soaked through with sweat, Rolex watch, probably real, wedding ring, definitely real, and a look of absolute terror that transcended race, class, and every other division that supposedly mattered. Sir, I need you to stay calm, Loretta said, her voice dropping into that soothing register she'd perfected over 5 years of dealing with scared patients. My name's Loretta, and I'm going to take real good care of you, but I need you to tell me, are you allergic to any medications? No, the man gasped. Can't breathe. You're breathing just fine, sugar. I can hear you talking, which means air's getting in and out. What's your name? Cornelius. Whitfield. Even through the haze of emergency protocols, that name registered. Cornelius Whitfield. As in Whitfield and Sons Bank. As in the man who owned half of downtown Charleston. As in the kind of man who probably never even looked at a black nurse except to ask where his real doctor was. But right now, he was just another human being whose heart was trying to kill him. Well, Mr. Whitfield, you picked a good night to have a heart attack. I'm the best damn nurse in this hospital, and I ain't gonna let you die on my watch. What happened next was a blur of precise chaos. IV lines, EKG leads, morphine for the pain, nitroglycerin for the blood pressure, and Loretta's steady hands doing what they'd been trained to do. Dr. Morrison stumbled in 15 minutes later, still smelling like the whiskey he'd been drinking at the country club, but by then Loretta had already stabilized the patient. Good work, nurse, Morrison slurred, barely looking at her. But Cornelius Whitfield looked, really looked, his eyes, clear now that the pain had receded, fixed on her name tag. Loretta Washington, he whispered. You saved my life. Just doing my job, sir. No. His hand, pale, manicured, probably never done a day of manual labor, reached out and grasped hers. You saw me. Not my name, not my money. You saw a man who needed help, and you helped. That's not common. That's rare." Loretta gently extracted her hand. "You rest now, Mr. Whitfield. Your wife's in the waiting room, probably worried sick." "I don't forget debts, Miss Washington. I don't forget." She smiled politely and moved on to the next patient. Rich white men said a lot of things when they were scared. They rarely meant them come morning. But Cornelius Whitfield wasn't like most men. Present day, Loretta opened her eyes as a black Lincoln Town car pulled up in front of her shabby little house. The driver's side door opened and out stepped Harrison Reed, 50 years old, silver hair, three-piece suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. "Mrs. Sterling," he called out, his voice carrying that particular blend of respect and professional warmth that came from 20 years of managing other people's money. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Harrison, baby, you know better than to call me that out here." Loretta's voice carried just the right note of elderly confusion. "My name's Loretta Washington. Always has been." Harrison's lips twitched with amusement as he climbed the sagging steps. "Of course. My apologies, Mrs. Washington. Beautiful day, isn't it? Hot as the devil's armpit, but I suppose that's summer in Charleston." She gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Sit yourself down before you get heat stroke in that fancy suit." He sat, and for a moment they simply existed in companionable silence. An old black woman and a white banker drinking sweet tea on a porch in the South. To anyone watching, it would look like maybe he was from the church, or perhaps a social worker checking on the elderly. No one would guess he was the vice president of the largest private bank in South Carolina, and she was his most valuable client. "The Sunset Pines acquisition is complete," Harrison said quietly, his eyes on the street rather than her face. "All paperwork is filed under Sterling Heritage Trust as requested. Your son-in-law has no idea you're the new owner." "That's good. Real good." Loretta's needles never stopped their clicking rhythm. "And the other matter?" "Thompson Estates is leveraged to the gills. He took out a second mortgage on the office building last month, the one you actually own the land under. He's been using creative accounting to hide the debt from your daughter. That boy always was better at spending money than making it." Loretta's voice was mild, but her eyes had gone hard as flint. "Anything else?" Harrison hesitated. "There's a woman, Vanessa Hayes. She's been seen with Bradley multiple times, restaurants, hotels. I took the liberty of having her investigated." "And?" "She's not what she appears to be. But I'll let you discover that on your own time." Harrison stood, straightening his tie. "Mrs. Washington, are you sure about this? The plan, I mean. It's extensive." Loretta finally looked up at him, and in that moment, Harrison saw not a sweet old grandmother, but the steel-spined woman who'd turned a $500,000 inheritance from Cornelius Whitfield into a portfolio worth over $200 million. "Harrison, let me tell you something. When I was a little girl growing up in the Jim Crow South, my mama used to say, 'Baby, they're going to underestimate you your whole life because you're black and because you're a woman.' You let them. You smile, you nod, you say yes, sir, and no, ma'am. And while they're patting themselves on the back for being so generous to the poor colored girl, you take everything they're not smart enough to hold on to." She paused, her needles stilling for just a moment. "My son-in-law called me a broke old woman, Harrison. He said I should be grateful they haven't put me in a home yet. He said this to my face, in front of my grandbabies, while sitting in a house that I paid for. So yes, I'm sure, because some lessons you can't teach with words. You gotta teach with consequences." Harrison nodded slowly. "I'll keep you updated on all developments. The gala is this Saturday. I know when the gala is, baby. I've been going to the Charleston Heritage Foundation gala for 30 years. Of course, I used to go through the service entrance, helping in the kitchen. This year, I think I'll try the front door." A slow smile spread across Harrison's face. "I'll make sure your name is on the VIP list." "Under which identity?" "Oh, I think Mrs. Loretta M. Sterling should make an appearance, don't you? It's been a while since I wore that particular hat." "It'll be quite the entrance. That's what I'm counting on." Sunday dinner at the Thompson residence was a production worthy of a stage play, complete with costume changes and carefully rehearsed lines. The house itself was a monument to borrowed taste. All granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, crown molding and hardwood floors. Everything picked out by an interior designer whose fee probably exceeded what Loretta made in a year as a nurse. Not that Bradley knew it was Loretta's money that made the down payment possible. The dining room table was set with china that cost more per plate than a weekly grocery bill. Wedgwood, if Loretta wasn't mistaken. Real crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier overhead. Swarovski, probably, because Bradley Thompson never met a status symbol he didn't want to own. Loretta sat in her assigned seat, not at the head of the table, God forbid, but 3 seats down on the right, between her granddaughter Grace and the wall. The children's table, essentially, even though Grace was 12 and Isaiah was 16. Isaiah caught her eye and winked. That boy was too perceptive for his own good, saw things other folks missed. He'd be dangerous someday, in the best possible way. "Mama, you want some more sweet potato casserole?" Diane's voice was soft, apologetic in a way that made Loretta's heart ache. Her daughter had inherited her father's gentle nature. Sweet Clarence Washington, God rest his soul, who died in a car accident when Diane was just 10. Too gentle for this world, both of them. "No thank you, baby. I'm watching my figure." Loretta smiled at her daughter, noting the way Diane's eyes were just a little too bright, her smile a little too fixed. Trouble in paradise, as if there had ever been any paradise to speak of. Bradley Thompson sat at the head of the table like a king surveying his domain. 42 years old, handsome in that generic way that white men with money often were. Good teeth, good hair, gym membership keeping the dad bod at bay. He wore a polo shirt with a little logo on the breast, khakis with a sharp crease, and a watch that screamed, "I'm successful," to anyone within visual range. "Vanessa, could you pass the wine?" Bradley's voice had that particular tone that men use when they're showing off for their mistress at the family dinner table. Bold, Loretta had to give him that. Stupid, but bold. Vanessa Hayes, 29 years old, blonde highlights, yoga pants masquerading as business casual, reached across the table with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Of course. This is a lovely Napa Cabernet, isn't it? You have such refined taste, Bradley." Refined taste, Loretta thought. "Child, you ain't even subtle." "It's a 2015 Jordan," Bradley said, swirling his glass with the confidence of a man who'd watched a YouTube video on wine tasting. $300 a bottle. Not the kind of thing everyone can appreciate. His eyes cut to Loretta on that last bit. Just for a second, but she caught it. Oh, she caught everything. "That's real nice, Bradley," Loretta said, her voice honey-sweet. "Back in my day, we drank Boone's Farm and called it fancy." "I bet you did." Bradley's smile didn't reach his eyes. Different times, different standards. "Bradley," Diane's voice held a warning note. "Mama worked hard her whole life. She deserves respect." "Of course she does, honey. I'm just saying, Loretta, you've had a good life, haven't you? Simple, honest work. There's nobility in service." Service. The word hung in the air like a slur that couldn't quite be called out as one. Isaiah's fork clinked against his plate a little too hard. "Grandma was a nurse for 35 years. She saved people's lives. That's not service, Dad, that's—" "Isaiah, adults are talking." Bradley didn't even look at his son. "You know what your problem is, Loretta? You don't appreciate what you have. This family has been very good to you. We let you keep that old house instead of insisting you move into a facility. We include you in family dinners. You let me?" Loretta's voice was still sweet, but something in her tone made Grace stop eating mid-bite. "That's mighty generous of you, Bradley." "Well, let's be honest." Bradley leaned back in his chair, wine glass in hand, warming to his subject. The way men do when they think they're making a point. "You're 65 years old, living in a house that should have been condemned years ago. Surviving on what? A small pension? Social Security? Without this family, without my generosity, where would you be?" Diane's face had gone pale. "Brad, please." "No, Diane, someone needs to say it. Your mother lives in a fantasy world where she thinks she's still independent. But the reality is, she's one medical emergency away from bankruptcy. And when that happens, guess who gets the bill? Us. This family. Me." Vanessa nodded along like a bobblehead, because of course she did. Little Grace, sweet baby Grace with her hair in 2 puffs and her daddy's eyes, looked like she might cry. "Grandma's not a fantasy." "Hush, baby girl," Loretta murmured, patting Grace's hand. Then she looked directly at Bradley Thompson and smiled. "You're absolutely right, Bradley. I am just a poor old woman, grateful for every scrap of kindness." Bradley preened, mistaking surrender for agreement. Isaiah's jaw was clenched so tight Loretta worried he might crack a tooth, and Diane just stared at her plate, silent tears tracking down her cheeks because she'd married this man and brought him into their lives, and now she had to live with that choice. In fact, Bradley continued, emboldened by wine and his own self-importance, Diane and I have been discussing your future. We think it's time to look at some options. He pulled a glossy brochure from somewhere, probably had it in his lap the whole time, waiting for the right moment, and slid it across the table. Sunset Pines Assisted Living, where golden years shine. Loretta picked it up with trembling hands. Hands that trembled not from age or fear, but from the sheer effort of not laughing. Sunset Pines, she read aloud. This is that new facility off Highway 17, isn't it? Brand new, state-of-the-art. 3 meals a day, activities, medical staff on site 24/7. You'd be well cared for. And how much does this level of care cost, if you don't mind my asking? That's not your concern. We'll handle the finances. With what money, Brad? Isaiah's voice cracked with emotion. We're barely making the mortgage as it is. Isaiah, go to your room. No! The boy stood up, all righteous teenage fury. I'm sick of you treating Grandma like she's nothing. She's not nothing. She's a burden, son. Bradley stood too, and suddenly the room felt too small. I know you love her. We all do. But love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't keep the lights on. And the hard truth is, maintaining 2 households when your grandmother could be safely cared for in one place is financially irresponsible. Financially irresponsible, Loretta repeated softly. That's a big term. It's the truth. Diane, tell your mother, I can't do this. Diane stood abruptly, chair scraping against hardwood. I can't sit here and listen to you talk about my mama like she's a line item on a budget report. Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We didn't. It's all right, baby girl. Loretta stood slowly, bones creaking in a way that wasn't entirely performative. I understand. Bradley's just being practical. Exactly. Bradley looked vindicated. Finally, some sense. Now, if you'll just sign this consent form. Consent form? Agreeing to tour the facility. It's just a formality. Loretta took the paper, reading it with the careful attention of someone who actually knew what she was looking at. Unlike Bradley, who probably hadn't read past the cover page, she saw the clause buried in paragraph 3. By signing, resident agrees to placement pending medical evaluation. It wasn't a tour consent. It was a commitment form. Her baby girl had married a snake. I need to think about it, Loretta said, folding the paper and tucking it into her purse, a worn leather thing held together with prayer and duct tape. Big decision like this? I should probably pray on it. Of course, Bradley said smoothly. Take your time, but not too much time. Sunset Pines has a waiting list, and I pulled strings to get you bumped up. The spot won't wait forever. I'm sure it won't. Loretta collected her purse and the Tupperware of leftovers Diane always sent home with her, leftovers from food Loretta's money had purchased, but who was counting? Thank you for dinner, baby. Bradley, Vanessa, children. Isaiah jumped up. I'll walk Grandma to her car. No need, Bradley started. I insist. Isaiah's tone left no room for argument. The night air was thick and sweet, carrying the scent of jasmine and impending rain. Loretta's ancient Honda Civic, rusted in spots, missing a hubcap, the kind of car invisible to people like Bradley Thompson, sat at the curb like a faithful old dog. Isaiah waited until they were both inside, doors closed, before he exploded. Grandma, you can't let him do this. He's trying to lock you away. He doesn't care about you. He just wants to... The boy's voice broke. Why didn't you tell them the truth? Why didn't you tell them you're not... That I have what, Isaiah? Loretta's voice was gentle. Money, power. That you're the one who... I saw the statements, Grandma. Last year when I was looking for my birth certificate in Mom's office. The Sterling Heritage Trust. All those properties. The bank accounts. That's you, isn't it? Well, so much for secrets. Loretta was quiet for a long moment, watching the light from the house. Her house, technically, though the deed said Diane Thompson, cast shadows across the lawn. You're too smart for your own good, baby. Why do you hide it? Why do you let him treat you like you're poor? Because I'm teaching him a lesson he never learned in all those fancy schools his daddy paid for. Loretta turned to face her grandson, and in the dim light of the car's interior, she looked less like a frail old woman and more like a general planning a war. I'm teaching him that you don't measure people by their bank accounts. You measure them by their character. And your daddy's character? It's bankrupt. But hush now and listen. I need you to do something for me, and it's important. Can you do that? Isaiah nodded, solemn as a judge. I need you to keep your eyes and ears open. Your daddy's up to something bigger than just trying to shove me in a nursing home. He's desperate, and desperate men do dangerous things. If you hear anything about money, lawyers, anything with my name attached, you call me immediately, day or night. Can you do that? You want me to spy on my own dad? I want you to protect your family. Sometimes that means seeing clearly what you don't want to see. Loretta cupped his face in her weathered hands. You're going to be somebody someday, Isaiah Thompson. Somebody important. But first you gotta learn this. Standing by while wrong happens makes you part of the wrong. You understand? Yes, ma'am? Good boy. She kissed his forehead. Now get back in that house before your daddy comes looking. And Isaiah, I love you more than sweet potato pie. I love you too, Grandma. He paused at the car door. Are you really going to be okay? Loretta smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who'd survived Jim Crow, buried a husband, raised a daughter alone, and built an empire in the shadows. Baby, I didn't survive 65 years in this world by being fragile. Now go on, and don't you worry about your grandma. She knows exactly what she's doing. Isaiah went, looking back twice before disappearing into the house. Loretta sat in her car for another moment, then pulled out her phone. Not the flip phone she carried for show, but the smartphone hidden in a secret pocket of her purse. She scrolled to a contact labeled simply VH. Dinner was eventful. He's moving faster than expected. Status update? The reply came within seconds. Files compiled. Evidence secured. Ready when you are. Loretta smiled and started the engine. The old Civic coughed to life with a wheeze that would make any mechanic weep. But it ran. Just like her, it ran. As she drove through the quiet Charleston streets toward the house everyone thought was all she had, Loretta May Washington, also known as Loretta M. Sterling, majority shareholder in Whitfield & Sons Bank, owner of 17 commercial properties, and one of the wealthiest black women in South Carolina, hummed along to the gospel station. Soon, very soon, Bradley Thompson was going to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Never underestimate the woman you're trying to destroy, especially when she's the one holding the knife. The Charleston Heritage Foundation Gala was the kind of event where old money pretended new money didn't exist, and new money pretended it had always been there. Held annually at the historic Dock Street Theater, it was 300 years of Southern aristocracy packed into one evening of champagne, charity, and carefully choreographed social climbing. Bradley Thompson had been angling for an invitation for 5 years. Tonight, he'd finally gotten one, thanks to a $25,000 table sponsorship he couldn't actually afford, charged to a credit card that was already screaming for mercy. But perception was reality in Charleston society, and Bradley needed to be perceived as a man on the rise. He adjusted his bow tie for the 15th time, watching himself in the men's room mirror. The tuxedo was rented, but nobody needed to know that. The cufflinks were real gold, well, gold-plated, and the shoes were shined to a high gloss that would last exactly as long as he avoided puddles. "You look good, boss," Vanessa purred, appearing behind him like a blonde apparition in a red dress that left very little to the imagination. Very James Bond. More like James Boring if we don't close the Harrington deal tonight. Bradley splashed water on his face, careful not to mess up his hair. You remember the plan? I smile, I charm, I mention that Thompson Estates specializes in waterfront development, and I gently steer the conversation toward investment opportunities. Vanessa reapplied her lipstick with the precision of a sniper loading a rifle. I've been doing this for 6 months, Brad. I know how to work a room. Yeah, well, tonight's different. Tonight's make or break. Old man Harrington is worth $50 million and looking to develop that marsh property on John's Island. If I can get him to use Thompson Estates for the project, we're talking a $20 million contract. That kind of money changes everything. What Bradley didn't mention, what he'd carefully avoided mentioning to anyone, including his wife, was that Thompson Estates was approximately 90 days away from bankruptcy. The second mortgage, the unpaid contractors, the creative accounting that had crossed the line from aggressive to potentially criminal about 6 months ago. He needed this deal. Badly. What about Diane? Vanessa asked. She didn't want to come? She's got a headache. Again. Bradley's tone suggested this was a regular occurrence. Probably for the best. She doesn't exactly shine at these things. And here I thought you married her for her sparkling personality. I married her because she was sweet and uncomplicated. I didn't know she came with baggage. Bradley dried his hands, tossing the paper towel toward the trash and missing. That mother of hers, Jesus, the woman's like an albatross around my neck. Speaking of which, did she sign the Sunset Pines paperwork? Not yet, but she will. I'm giving her until Wednesday, then I'm having my lawyer draw up incompetency papers. If she won't go willingly, we'll make it involuntary. Vanessa's expression flickered, just for a second, something that might have been discomfort or disapproval, but then the professional smile snapped back into place. That seems harsh. That seems necessary. The old bat's sitting on prime real estate, Vanessa. That house and lot are worth at least $1 million if I can get them rezoned commercial. But I can't do anything while she's alive and competent, so... He shrugged. Sunset Pines solves that problem. Once she's declared incompetent, Diane gets power of attorney, I control Diane, and boom, problem solved. You really don't like her, do you? I don't like poor Vanessa. And she represents everything about Diane's past I'm trying to leave behind. The Section 8 housing, the food stamps, the whole struggling black family narrative. I'm trying to build something here, and I can't do it while dragging that kind of baggage behind me. He checked his reflection one final time, satisfied with what he saw. A successful businessman, a pillar of the community, a man on his way up. Not a man on the edge of total financial collapse. Not a man who'd been embezzling from his own company to maintain appearances. Not a man whose entire life was a house of cards and a windstorm. All right, Bradley said, offering Vanessa his arm. Let's go make me rich. The ballroom was a symphony of old Southern elegance. Crystal chandeliers that had witnessed 2 centuries of Charleston's elite. Hardwood floors that gleamed like mirrors. And enough flowers to stock a funeral home for a month. The guest list read like a who's who of South Carolina money. Senators, judges, business moguls, and the kind of families whose wealth was measured in generations rather than dollars. Bradley worked the room with the determination of a man who knew this was his shot. Handshake here, business card there. Always the right amount of deference to the old guard and confidence with the new money crowd. Mr. Harrington, such a pleasure. Senator Davidson, I read your position paper on coastal development. Mrs. Rutledge, you look absolutely stunning. The smile never wavered. The charm never flagged. This was Bradley Thompson's superpower, the ability to convince people he belonged in rooms where he absolutely didn't. Then the lights dimmed slightly, and Harrison Reed took the stage. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For those who don't know me, I'm Harrison Reed, VP of Whitfield & Sons Bank, and it's my honor to welcome you to the 47th Annual Charleston Heritage Foundation Gala. Bradley tuned out the pleasantries, scanning the room for Harrington. The old man was at table 7, looking bored, and the entrance doors opened. Later, Bradley would remember this moment in excruciating detail. The way conversation stuttered to a halt like a record scratch. The way heads turned in synchronous curiosity. The way the very air in the room seemed to shift. Because walking through those doors was Loretta Mae Washington. Except she didn't look like Loretta Mae Washington. Gone was the house dress and orthopedic shoes. Gone was the tired old woman who'd sat meekly at his dinner table while he insulted her. Gone was every assumption Bradley had ever made about his mother-in-law. This woman wore a navy blue Chanel gown that probably cost more than Bradley's car. The elegant kind of expensive that whispered rather than shouted. Her silver hair, usually hidden under a church hat, was styled in elegant waves that framed her face. Mikimoto pearls, real ones Bradley's jewelry-appraising eye recognized immediately, circled her neck. She carried a vintage Hermes clutch and walked with the bearing of someone who'd been attending galas like this her entire life, which Bradley was beginning to suspect she had. On her arm was attorney Gerald Foster, the lawyer who'd successfully sued the city of Charleston for discrimination and won a $50 million settlement. The man was a legend in legal circles, the kind of attorney you hired when you wanted to destroy someone completely and had the money to make it happen. What the hell was Loretta doing with Gerald Foster? Is that? Vanessa whispered, her voice tight with confusion. It can't be, Bradley muttered, but his stomach was already sinking. Loretta glided through the room, and glided was the only appropriate word, stopping here and there to exchange air kisses with women Bradley recognized from the society pages. They greeted her warmly, familiarly. Loretta, darling, it's been too long. Mrs. Sterling, you look absolutely radiant. Sterling? Bradley's brain was trying to process information that didn't compute. His broke, pathetic mother-in-law was being greeted like royalty by the same people who'd barely acknowledged his existence 5 minutes ago. Then Loretta's eyes found him across the room, and she smiled. It was not a friendly smile. The auction started promptly at 8. Bradley had positioned himself strategically near the Harringtons, ready to make his move during the social lubrication of competitive bidding. Item 1, a week at a beach house in Hilton Head. Item 2, golf clubs signed by Tiger Woods. Item 3, a vintage wine collection. Bradley bid on nothing, conserving his resources for the big-ticket items that would impress Harrington. Then came Item 7. Ladies and gentlemen, next we have a truly spectacular offering, the auctioneer announced. 1 week at a private villa on Kiawa Island, includes chef service, spa access, and private beach. Donated by the Sterling Family Trust. Starting bid, $50,000. Sterling Family Trust. That name again. Bradley's heart was pounding now, a sick realization creeping up his spine like poison. 50,000, someone called out. 60, another voice. 75,000. That was Harrington, making his first bid of the night. Perfect. Bradley needed to outbid him, show dominance, create an opening for conversation. 80,000, Bradley called out, his voice strong and confident. The room turned to look at him. Good. He stood a little straighter. 100,000, came a calm, familiar voice. Loretta Mae Washington, Sterling, sat at the VIP table, paddle raised with casual elegance. Bradley's face flushed. The old bitch was trying to show him up. 110, he countered. 125, Loretta responded without even looking at him, as if his bid was a minor inconvenience rather than a direct challenge. The room was watching now, sensing drama. Bradley's credit card was already maxed, but he had a backup card. Had to. This was about dominance now, about not letting this woman, this poor old woman, embarrass him in front of everyone who mattered. 150,000, Bradley shouted. The room went quiet. Loretta sipped her champagne, appeared to consider, then lowered her paddle. All yours, Mr. Thompson. Bradley felt a surge of victory. He'd won. Actually, Harrison Reed's voice cut through the room, amplified by the microphone. Before we close bidding, I need to verify Mr. Thompson's available credit. Bank protocol for bids over 100,000. Bradley's blood turned to ice. I'm sure that won't be necessary, he said, voice tight. My credit is excellent. I'm sure it is, Harrison said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But policy is policy. Won't take but a moment. Harrison pulled out a tablet, tapped a few times, and his expression shifted from professional courtesy to something colder. Mr. Thompson, I'm showing a significant lien placed on Thompson Estates as of, let me see, this morning at 9 a.m. Your available credit appears to be... Harrison looked up, and Bradley saw something that might have been pity in his eyes. $0. The room erupted in murmurs. Bradley felt the floor drop out from under him. That's impossible. There must be a mistake. There's no mistake, sir. Would you like me to read the account details? No, Bradley's voice cracked. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, watching him fail in the most public way possible. Diane, use your card. His wife wasn't there. Of course she wasn't there. Because she had a headache. Because she never wanted to come to these things in the first place. I'll need to sort this out, Bradley stammered, backing away from his table. There's obviously been some kind of error. No error, baby, Loretta's voice rang out, clear and strong. She stood, all eyes turning to her. Harrison, put the 150,000 on my account. I'd hate for Mr. Thompson's financial difficulties to deprive the Heritage Foundation of such a generous donation. Harrison's smile was genuine now. Of course, Mrs. Sterling, thank you for your generosity. Mrs. Sterling? Bradley's voice was strangled. What the hell is going on? Loretta, what? Mr. Thompson. Gerald Foster stood, his voice carrying the weight of legal authority. I'd suggest you lower your voice. You're making a scene. I'm making a... She's my mother-in-law. She's a broke old woman living in a shack. She doesn't have $150,000. She doesn't have... Careful, Mr. Thompson, Loretta said softly, but her voice cut through his rant like a scalpel. You might want to reconsider your assumptions about what I do and don't have. especially before you sign any more papers regarding my incompetency." The room was dead silent now. "How did you—" Bradley's face had gone from red to white. "You were spying on me?" "I don't have to spy, baby. I just have to pay attention. And trust me, I've been paying very close attention to you for 10 years now." Loretta walked toward him, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like a countdown timer. When she reached him, she lowered her voice so only he could hear. "That house you live in? I bought it. The car you drive? I leased it. The company you're so proud of? Built on land that I own. You've been living off my money for a decade, Bradley Thompson, and you didn't even know it. So when you call me broke—" She smiled that terrible smile again. "Well, let's just say you might want to check your facts before you run your mouth." She turned to address the room at large, her voice projecting like she'd been trained for the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please forgive the family drama. My son-in-law is going through a difficult time financially, and I'm afraid it's affecting his judgment. I'm sure you all understand. Now, shall we continue with the auction? I believe item 8 is a painting by a local artist. I'll start the bidding at $20,000. And just like that, the room moved on. Because in Charleston society, money talked, and Bradley Thompson no longer had any. He stood frozen, watching his mother-in-law command a room full of people who wouldn't have given him the time of day, watching his entire world collapse around him while she smiled and sipped champagne. Vanessa materialized at his elbow. "Brad, we should leave." "Don't touch me," he hissed, jerking away from her. "This is your fault. You were supposed to investigate her. You were supposed to—" "I did investigate her," Vanessa said quietly. "Want to know what I found?" "What?" Vanessa pulled out her phone, showed him a photograph. Loretta May Washington sitting across from Cornelius Whitfield at a restaurant, both of them laughing, papers spread between them. The date stamp read 1998. Her maiden name is Sterling, Brad, Loretta May Sterling. She changed it when she married Diane's father, but legally kept Sterling for her business dealings. She's been a silent partner in Whitfield & Sons Bank since 2015, when old man Whitfield died. She owns the controlling interest, 47% of all shares. Bradley couldn't breathe. She owns Sunset Pines, the nursing home you tried to put her in. She owns the land Thompson Estates is built on. She owns 17 commercial properties in Charleston County alone. And most importantly, Vanessa leaned in close, she owns the note on your second mortgage. As of this morning, she called it in. That's the lien Harrison Reed referenced. "Why are you telling me this?" Bradley's voice was barely a whisper. "Because I'm done, Brad." Vanessa stepped back, and for the first time since he'd known her, her smile was genuine. "My name is Vanessa Hayes. I'm a licensed private investigator. I've been working for Mrs. Sterling for the past 6 months, documenting everything. The embezzlement, the fake invoices, the offshore accounts you thought nobody knew about. All of it." She pulled out a small recorder from her clutch, pressed play. Bradley's own voice filled the small space between them. "That old hag won't live forever. When she dies, Diane gets everything. Then I'll control it all. I just need to speed up the process. Maybe some bad medication, a fall down the stairs, something that looks like an accident." His face went gray. "You recorded me. That's illegal. Actually, South Carolina is a one-party consent state for recordings. I consented. Therefore, it's perfectly legal." Vanessa tucked the recorder away. "Mrs. Sterling says to tell you that she doesn't negotiate with people who threaten her family. She destroys them. Professionally, financially, and if necessary, legally. You have 72 hours to vacate the house, her house, before she files eviction proceedings. Oh, and she's already contacted the DA about the embezzlement. They'll probably want to talk to you." Vanessa walked away, her red dress disappearing into the crowd. Bradley stood alone in the middle of the Charleston Heritage Foundation Gala, surrounded by 300 people who would be talking about this night for years to come. The night Bradley Thompson's empire collapsed. The night he learned you don't mess with Loretta May Sterling. The night he discovered that the hand that rocks the cradle might also be the hand that signs your death warrant. He looked across the room one last time and found Loretta watching him. She raised her champagne glass in a mock toast. Then she turned away, dismissing him as completely as he'd once dismissed her. It was over, and Bradley Thompson finally understood. He'd never stood a chance. 3 days after the gala, Bradley Thompson sat in a strip mall office that smelled like cheap coffee and desperation. The sign on the door read Monroe and Associates, Legal Services, but the peeling paint and water-stained ceiling tiles told a different story. This wasn't the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted justice. This was the kind you hired when you needed someone who'd bend the rules until they snapped. Silas Monroe was 60 if he was a day, with a comb-over that fooled nobody, and a law degree from a school that probably didn't exist anymore. But he had the one qualification Bradley needed. He was willing to do things that would get a legitimate lawyer disbarred. "Let me get this straight," Silas said, leaning back in his chair with a creak that suggested imminent structural failure. "You want me to draft a will, a fake will, saying your mother-in-law left everything to your wife in the event of her sudden death?" "That's right." "And you understand that's fraud. Multiple felonies, actually. Forgery, attempted theft, conspiracy. I'll pay you $50,000. Cash." Bradley slid an envelope across the desk. Inside was actually $5,000, everything he had left after liquidating his watch, his wedding ring, and Diane's jewelry while she slept. But Silas didn't need to know that yet. The lawyer's eyes lit up with the kind of greed that made bad decisions inevitable. $50,000. 25 now, 25 when the job's done. "And how exactly do you plan to expedite the need for this will?" Silas's tone made it clear he knew exactly what Bradley was planning. Bradley leaned forward. "She's old. 65. These things happen. Heart attack, stroke, bad reaction to medication. Maybe she takes a fall down those rickety stairs of hers. Grief does strange things to elderly folks, especially after they lose a daughter." The room went very, very quiet. "You're talking about murder," Silas said flatly. "I'm talking about nature taking its course, with maybe a little assistance." What Bradley couldn't see from his angle, was the slight movement behind the stained curtain that separated Silas's office from the storage room. Didn't see the phone camera recording every word. Didn't see Isaiah Thompson, 16 years old and shaking with fury, capturing his father's confession. Because Loretta hadn't been idle after the gala. She'd had Vanessa tail Bradley 24/7, and when Isaiah had called his grandmother 2 hours ago, saying his father was meeting with some sketchy lawyer, Loretta had made one phone call. Vanessa had gotten Isaiah into that building and positioned him perfectly. "So you'll do it?" Bradley pressed. "For 50 grand? Hell, I'll do it in calligraphy." Silas grinned, showing teeth that had seen better decades. "When do you need it?" "Thanksgiving. Big family dinner at Loretta's place. She invited everyone, trying to make peace or some bullshit. Perfect opportunity. Lots of people around, easy to stage an accident." "And your wife? She gonna be okay with this?" "Diane doesn't need to know anything. She'll grieve, she'll inherit. And 6 months later, we'll be living the life we should have had all along, without that old bitch holding us back." Isaiah's hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped the phone. He'd known his father was cruel. He'd known Bradley was selfish. But this? Planning to murder Grandma and possibly Mom? The boy wanted to burst through that curtain, wanted to scream, wanted to... Vanessa's hand on his shoulder stopped him. She shook her head, mouthed, "Let him finish." "One more thing," Bradley said. "I need you to make it look legit. Old paper, proper notarization, the whole 9 yards. I know a guy who can forge a notary seal. It'll cost extra. I don't care what it costs. I just need Loretta Mae Washington Sterling to be worth more to me dead than alive." Isaiah had heard enough. Vanessa quietly led him out the back exit while Bradley and Silas continued their conspiracy. 2 men planning murder over bad coffee in a strip mall office, never knowing that every word would be their undoing. 2 hours later, Isaiah sat in his grandmother's kitchen, the real kitchen, not the one Bradley had seen. Because Loretta's shack was only a shack on the outside. Inside, after you passed through the deliberately shabby entryway, was a home that whispered of quiet wealth. Custom cabinetry, marble countertops, appliances that cost more than some cars. She kept it hidden, curtains always drawn, because Loretta Mae Sterling knew the value of being underestimated. "Play it again," Loretta said softly. Isaiah's hands shook as he pressed play on his phone for the 3rd time. Bradley's voice filled the kitchen. Nature taking its course, with maybe a little assistance. Diane sat at the table, tears streaming down her face. Her whole body shook with silent sobs. Gerald Foster stood by the window, his lawyer's mind already calculating charges and sentences. Detective Patricia Moore, A woman Loretta had saved from a heart attack 15 years ago and who owed her a debt she'd never forgotten, listened with the cold focus of someone building a case. When the recording ended, Diane looked up at her mother. "He was going to kill you. Kill us." "I know, baby." "How long have you known?" "I suspected for a while. Confirmed it about 3 weeks ago when Vanessa found records of him researching untraceable poisons online." Loretta's voice was steady, but her hands, those weathered hands that had saved so many lives, trembled slightly. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me. You loved him. Maybe you still do in some way. Some things you gotta see with your own eyes before you can accept them." Isaiah had been silent through all of this, but now he spoke. "What happens now, Grandma?" Loretta exchanged looks with Detective Moore. "Now," Patricia said, "we give him enough rope to hang himself. Mrs. Sterling has agreed to host Thanksgiving dinner as planned. We'll have undercover officers positioned throughout the house. The moment Mr. Thompson makes his move, whether it's poison, staged accident, whatever, we take him down. Hard." "You're using my mother as bait," Diane whispered. "I'm using myself as bait, baby. There's a difference." Loretta reached across the table, took her daughter's hand. "This ends Thursday. One way or another, this ends." Thanksgiving Day dawned cold and clear, the kind of Carolina morning that made you grateful for family and home. Loretta's kitchen smelled like every holiday should. Turkey roasting, sweet potato casserole bubbling in the oven, collard greens simmering with ham hock, cornbread cooling on the counter. The table was set for 8. Loretta, Diane, Bradley, Isaiah, Grace, Gerald Foster, playing the role of Mama's gentleman friend, Harrison Reed, supposedly just a family friend, and Detective Patricia Moore, posing as Loretta's cousin from Atlanta. Bradley arrived at 2 p.m. sharp, dressed in khakis and a sweater that screamed, "I'm a good family man." He carried an expensive bottle of wine, 1995 Bordeaux, the label proclaimed. "Loretta," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "I wanted to apologize for my behavior at the gala. I was under a lot of stress, said some things I didn't mean. This is a peace offering." He held out the wine bottle like it was Excalibur. Loretta took it with a warm smile. "Why, Bradley? That's mighty thoughtful of you. Shall we open it with dinner? I actually thought we might have a toast now. You know, to new beginnings, fresh starts, family." "Of course, baby. Let me get some glasses." What happened next occurred in a carefully choreographed dance that Loretta and Detective Moore had rehearsed 3 times. Loretta set out 8 wine glasses on the counter. Bradley, eager to be helpful, moved to open the bottle. "Let me do that." "Oh no, let Gerald do it," Loretta said. "He's got that fancy sommelier training." Gerald took the bottle, but in a practiced accident, knocked over several glasses. In the confusion of cleaning up, the glasses got shuffled, mixed up, redistributed. Bradley's face tightened almost imperceptibly. He'd been watching which glass was meant for Loretta. Now he had no idea. "I'm so sorry," Gerald said smoothly. "Let me just—" "Here, Bradley, why don't you take this one, as the guest of honor?" Bradley stared at the glass of deep red wine. Was it the one he'd poisoned? Or was it safe? His own careful plan had become Russian roulette. "Actually," Bradley said, voice tight, "I'm not feeling well. Maybe I shouldn't drink—" "Nonsense!" Loretta raised her glass. "A toast, like you said. To family, to forgiveness, to getting exactly what we deserve." Everyone raised their glasses. Bradley's hand shook. "Come on, Dad," Isaiah said, and there was something hard in his voice. "Don't be rude. Drink." Bradley looked around the table. Everyone was watching him, waiting. He couldn't back out now without raising suspicion. He lifted the glass to his lips. "Stop!" Grace's young voice rang out. "Daddy, don't!" Everyone froze. Grace's face crumpled. "I heard you. Last night, on the phone with that lawyer man. You were going to hurt Grandma. You were going to—" She dissolved into tears. Bradley's face went from pale to gray. "Grace, baby, you don't understand what you heard." "I understand perfectly," Isaiah said, pulling out his phone. He pressed play. Bradley's voice filled the room. "She's old. These things happen. Heart attack, stroke, bad reaction to medication. Maybe she takes a fall down those rickety stairs." Diane gasped. Even though she'd heard it before, hearing it again, at a Thanksgiving table surrounded by family, made it freshly horrible. "I can explain. Bradley started. Explain what? Detective Moore stood, pulling out her badge. How you were planning to murder your mother-in-law. How you conspired with Silas Monroe to forge documents. How you've been embezzling from Thompson Estates for 2 years. Oh, we've got explanations, Mr. Thompson. Lots of them. 2 uniformed officers appeared from the hallway. They'd been waiting in the guest room. Bradley Thompson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted poisoning, fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent. Bradley's legs gave out. He collapsed into a chair, all the fight gone out of him. How? How did you... know? Loretta finished. She walked over to him, and her voice was colder than a Charleston winter. Baby, I've known what you were from the day you met my daughter. I've been watching you, testing you, giving you chance after chance to be a decent man. You failed every single test. But the money, the investments... Oh, that. Loretta smiled, and it was sharp as broken glass. You want to know the funniest part? That lucky break you got 10 years ago? That anonymous investor who gave you $500,000 to start Thompson Estates. Bradley's eyes widened. That was me, sweetheart. Me and Cornelius Whitfield. God rest his soul. We saw you sniffing around my daughter, and I wanted to know what kind of man you really were. So we gave you money, connections, opportunities, everything you needed to succeed on your own merit. All you had to do was be good to my Diane. Love her. Respect her. Respect me. Loretta leaned down until she was eye level with him. But you couldn't even manage that, could you? You took my money, lived in my house, built your company on my land, and treated me like garbage because I was old and black and beneath you. Well, congratulations, Bradley. You played yourself. The officers pulled Bradley to his feet, cuffed him. Diane, please, he begged as they led him away. I love you. I did this for us. Don't. Diane's voice was ice. Don't you dare. You did this for yourself. You always did everything for yourself. I was just too blind to see it. The kids need a father. What they need, Isaiah said quietly, is to know that justice exists, that people who hurt others get consequences. You taught me that today, Dad. Just not the way you intended. Bradley was still protesting, still making excuses as they led him out to the squad car. The neighbors would talk about this for years. The Thanksgiving the police arrested Bradley Thompson right out of his mother-in-law's house. 1 year later, Bradley Thompson sat in the prison cafeteria in an orange jumpsuit, stirring mystery meat that might have once been turkey. Thanksgiving in prison was a special kind of hell, especially when you were serving 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder with another 10 for the embezzlement charges. His cellmate, a guy named Jerome who was in for armed robbery, watched him push food around his tray. You gonna eat that? Knock yourself out. Jerome took the tray. You're that guy, right? The one who tried to kill his rich mother-in-law? I didn't... Bradley stopped. What was the point? Yeah, that's me. Man, that's cold. What did she ever do to you? She existed. She was poor, or I thought she was poor. She was black. She was old. She represented everything I was trying to leave behind. And now? Now I'm in here. She's out there living her best life. And I lost everything. My wife divorced me. My kids won't take my calls. My company's bankrupt. And I've got a decade and a half to think about how I'm the dumbest son of a bitch in South Carolina. Jerome laughed. At least you're self-aware. That's more than most guys in here. Bradley stared at the gray walls. You know what the worst part is? She gave me everything. The money to start my business, the house, the opportunities. All I had to do was not be a complete piece of shit. And I couldn't even manage that. Pride's expensive, man. You paid full price. Diane Washington Thompson, she'd gone back to her maiden name, sat at a book signing in a small independent bookstore. Her memoir, The Woman Who Saved Me Was the One I Thought Needed Saving, had become a surprise bestseller, resonating with women who'd found strength in unexpected places. A reader, maybe 60 years old, approached with a worn copy. Mrs. Washington, your book saved my life. I was in a relationship with a man who made me feel small. Reading about your mother's strength gave me the courage to leave. Diane's eyes filled with tears. That's all Mama ever wanted, to help people find their own strength. Thank you for telling me. She signed the book. We're all stronger than we know. Diane. After the signing, she drove to her new place, a modest 2-bedroom apartment that she paid for with her teacher's salary and book royalties. No more mansion, no more keeping up appearances, just honest work and honest living. Isaiah and Grace were waiting when she got home. "How'd it go, Mom?" Isaiah asked. He was taller now, filled out, wearing a Harvard hoodie with pride. "Sold 40 books. The store owner said she wants to order more." "That's amazing!" Grace hugged her mother. At 13, she'd grown into a young woman who looked more like her grandmother every day. Same sharp eyes, same quiet strength. "Grandma called," Isaiah said. "She wants us for Sunday dinner." Diane smiled. "Tell her we'll be there." Loretta May Washington sat in her rocking chair, knitting needles clicking in the rhythm of contentment. The house behind her looked exactly the same as it had a year ago, still shabby on the outside, still magnificent within. She'd learned long ago that the best treasures were the ones people didn't know to steal. Gerald Foster sat beside her, reading the newspaper. They'd been courting, Loretta's word, for 8 months now, taking it slow. At their age, there was no rush. "Says here the Charleston Heritage Foundation raised a record $2 million this year," Gerald commented. "That's good. They do important work." "Says their largest donor was the Sterling Family Trust." Again. Loretta smiled but said nothing. A car pulled up. Diane's sensible Honda. Isaiah and Grace tumbled out first, racing to the porch like they were still small children. "Grandma!" Grace launched herself into Loretta's arms. "I got an A on my history project." "Of course you did, baby girl. You're brilliant." Isaiah was more measured, but his hug was just as warm. "Harvard sent my acceptance letter. Full scholarship." "Never doubted it for a second." Loretta cupped his face. "You're going to change the world, Isaiah Thompson. Already have in some ways." Diane climbed the steps more slowly, carrying a pie. "Hey, Mama." "Hey, baby girl." They sat together on the porch, 3 generations of Washington women plus one good man and a boy becoming a man himself. The afternoon sun painted everything gold. "Mama," Diane said quietly, "do you ever regret it, the way things went down?" Loretta was quiet for a long moment, needles clicking, considering. "I regret that you got hurt. I regret that the kids had to see their daddy's true nature. But regret teaching a cruel man that cruelty has consequences? No, baby. I don't regret that at all. People in town still talk about it." "Let 'em talk. People been talking about me my whole life. That black nurse thinks she's something. That old woman doesn't know her place. Talking is just noise, Diane. What matters is this." She gestured to the porch, the family, the moment. "What matters is that we're here, we're together, and we're free of poison disguised as family." Isaiah leaned against the railing. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why didn't you just tell Dad who you really were from the beginning? Why let him think you were poor?" Loretta set down her knitting and looked at her grandson with eyes that had seen 65 years of struggle and triumph. "Because, baby, character is what you do when you think nobody's watching. When you think the person in front of you has no power, no money, no influence. How do you treat them? Do you show kindness, respect, or do you show your true self?" She paused. "Your daddy failed that test every single day for 10 years. He had chance after chance to be decent to me just because it was the right thing to do. But he couldn't manage it, and that told me everything I needed to know about who he really was." "But you gave him money anyway, the startup funding." "I did, because I wanted to give him every opportunity to succeed. I wanted my daughter to have a partner who could build something real. But more than that, I wanted to see if success would make him kind or just make him worse." Loretta's voice went soft. "Turns out money doesn't change people. It just makes them more of what they already were. Your daddy was small and cruel when he was broke. Success just gave him better tools to hurt people with." Grace, who'd been quiet, spoke up. "Are you glad he's in prison?" "No, baby. I'm not glad. I don't take joy in anyone's suffering, not even people who deserve it. But I am glad he can't hurt anyone else. And I'm glad you and your brother and your mama are safe. That's what matters to me." The sun was setting now, painting the Charleston sky in shades of pink and gold. A gospel song drifted from someone's radio down the street. Sister Rosetta Tharpe, still singing about strange things happening every day. Loretta picked up her knitting again, starting on a new project, a blue scarf this time, for Gerald. "You know what I learned in my 65 years on this earth?" she said to no one in particular, and everyone at once. "I learned that revenge is a fool's game, but justice? Justice is divine. I learned that the quietest person in the room might be the most powerful. I learned that age and race and gender, all those things people use to decide who matters, they don't mean a damn thing when you've got wisdom, patience, and a good lawyer." Gerald chuckled. "Don't forget a good banker." "And a good banker," Loretta agreed with a smile. Isaiah pulled out his phone, started recording. "Grandma, say that again. I want to remember it." "Remember what, baby?" "All of it. Everything you just said. I want to remember how you taught us that dignity isn't something anyone can take from you, that being underestimated is sometimes an advantage, that the hand that rocks the cradle runs the world," Loretta finished. "But it does it quietly, baby. Always quietly. Let folks think you're just a sweet old grandmother knitting on a porch. Let them make their assumptions. And while they're underestimating you, you build your empire, protect your family, and make sure that when the dust settles, you're the one left standing." She looked directly at the camera on Isaiah's phone, and her voice rang with the authority of someone who'd survived Jim Crow, buried a husband, raised a daughter alone, built a fortune from nothing, and defeated a man who thought he could destroy her. The moral of the story? Don't ever mistake kindness for weakness. Don't ever think age means powerless. And never, ever underestimate a Southern black woman who's been quiet for too long. Because when she finally decides to speak, empires fall. Isaiah stopped recording, eyes shining. "That's perfect, Grandma." "No, baby, this is perfect." Loretta gestured to the porch, the family, the evening settling soft around them. "Everything else was just noise. This right here, this is what I fought for. This is what matters." As the sun set on Charleston, 3 generations of Washington women sat together on a porch that had witnessed a century of struggles and triumphs. Somewhere across town, Bradley Thompson sat in a cell, finally understanding the cost of cruelty. Somewhere in the city, the Sterling Heritage Trust continued its quiet work, building wealth and opportunity for those who needed it most. And on a shabby porch that hid magnificent secrets, Loretta May Washington, sterling to those who knew, rocked and knitted and smiled. Because in the end, she'd gotten exactly what she wanted. Her family, safe and whole. Her daughter, strong and free. Her grandchildren, wise beyond their years. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the underestimated woman wins. Not through violence, not through revenge, but through patience, wisdom, and the simple act of being exactly who she'd always been, unbreakable.